Hello, hi everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are all based. As usual, I'm asking you, I've just asked in the chat box if you like to write down where you are from, because it's always nice to know where our community is based. It's always very good to know. So my name is Silvia, and I'm here as usually, to support you during this live workshop. So this is one of a series of live webinars we are organizing with Ellie Publishing. And beside me, you can see our guest speaker today, André Hedlund. I'm going to introduce him in shortly. Just before giving the floor to him, I would like I'd like to share with you just a few technical details regarding this platform and what's going on now. What are you going to participate to? So this will be a workshop, a training workshop. It will consist of 45 minutes and then about 10-15 minutes of questions and answers. Where can you write down your questions? Well, there's a chat box or question box. So it depends whether you are connected through a smartphone or a PC. So it's called or chat or question. So there's a toolbar, there are just a few tools, and then select chat or question. Remember, this platform doesn't allow to see each other's comments. So you will feel you are alone, but you're not, I promise you. I'm here, I'm sitting at the back, I can see hundreds of you following us, and I will be dealing with your questions, comments, and everything. I'd just like to suggest all the time to take this opportunity to write down any comments you might have and questions you might have during the session and at the end. I think it's a great opportunity to get in touch with our speaker, André, today and ask him for anything you like to get an answer to, or you like to get to know more, etc., etc. Then an important thing is that you will receive a certificate in a digital format. I know it's very important for you, the certificate, and it will be sent to you straight away tomorrow, late afternoon. Check your inbox, okay, so your mailbox. Then our speaker has kindly put together a handout for you, which can be downloaded again from there should be an icon, a sheet icon on your mobile phone or a handout on your computer. Just press there and remember to download it before the end of the session, okay? It's a PDF, it's useful, it contains tips and suggestions that you can download before the end of the session and study and share, for your archive, your study, your knowledge after this presentation. Then, last but not least, there will be a recorded video available of this live event. Make sure to follow us on Facebook because we will be announcing when the video will be available on YouTube channel through Facebook. Okay, so make sure to follow Ellie Publishing Facebook page. And then I think I'm happy now to then introduce you, dear teachers, to André Hedlund, directly from Brazil, beautiful Brazil. We got André. André is a consultant, he's an educational consultant, he's a speaker, he's a bilingualism specialist, and he's also academic director of Edu Gallery, and he's also teacher trainer language ed, and he's also an e-moderator for the British Council. What else? So many things. He's also leader, actually, of Brazil TESOL's Mind, Brain and Education Special Interest Group. And he couldn't miss, he's also writer. So he also writes ELT materials and also online courses. So he's definitely into this ELT world with all hands and foot, I would say. I'm very pleased now to give the floor to André with his talk about boosting students' productivity, promoting productive skills. Enjoy the webinars, and for anything, just chat in the box, right in the chat box, and we'll be here. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sylvia. It's always a pleasure to connect with teachers from around the world. So I have to thank you personally, Sylvia, for inviting me, and of course Ellie Publishing for counting on me for such events, because as I said, it's not only about teaching teachers, but it's really about connecting. So please, teachers, wherever you are, Make sure you follow Ellie Publishing on social media, and make sure you follow me as well, because I post a lot of tips and ideas for you to work with your students. And today I'm very enthusiastic, let's say, because we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and maybe I will make you a little sad at the beginning. And then I promise I will try to give you a couple of solutions to make you happy. Yes. So let me start sharing my screen so that you can take a look. Make sure, of course, if you want to, that you can take pictures, you can take photos, you can share them on social media. If you want, you can follow me on social media as well. So this is my handle for, this is my profile on Instagram. That's the one I use for the international audience of teachers. So that's where I post mostly in English. I do post now and then something in Portuguese for my fellow teachers here in Brazil. But make sure you also follow Ellie Publishing on Facebook. So whenever you post anything, tag me, tag Ellie Publishing as well. So the big topic, the big question, how can we boost our students' productivity? Well, before we get to that part, I want to ask you, and then you can reflect. If you want to share something in the chat box, then I can ask Sylvia to read to me later. But I want you to reflect very quickly if you are feeling happy today. And one of the ideas behind this question here, I don't know if you knew that, but today is supposed to be International Happiness Day according to the UN. So if you're not feeling happy, I hope that by the end of the session, you feel a little bit happier. But before, let me make you sad because I have to give you some real facts about how we've been teaching our students, okay? And let's start with the agenda. So we're going to talk about receptive and productive skills. It's always good to define what they are so we can learn how to use them more effectively. Then I'll show you a little bit about the brain, because that's what I do, right? I will focus on memory, so a little bit about memory. Then the inconvenient truth, that's the part that will get you a little bit sadder. And then we will go over the usual process for teaching productive skills. Then I'll give you some concrete examples using some Ellie Publishing books. And finally, I'm going to share some resources with you, some links. And of course, don't forget to download the handout. So the handout is right there for you, a PDF. Do it before the end of the session, okay? Well, do you know the difference between receptive and productive skills? I think most of you are familiar. If you are not familiar, you can probably think for 10 seconds, and just by reading each word out loud, you can probably figure out what they are. But I got an official definition here from Teaching English, the British Council, that I think will help us be on the same page, right? So take a look. Receptive skills. I don't want to read to you because I think I get in the way of the voice inside your head. So I'll give you 30 seconds to read that part while I drink some tea, okay? Okay. I hope you had time to read that part. So if receptive skills are those skills, right? What are productive skills? So what do you think is the definition for productive skills? Well, if we contrast, this is what we have. Take a look. Okay. So I hope you noticed that I actually highlighted some words, keywords that are very important. So whenever we think of receptive skills, we think of passive skills, right? So skills that usually help our students receive information and understand information. But then when they have to use that information in an active way, then they have to use their productive skills. And traditionally, we think about listening, reading as receptive, speaking and writing as productive. Now, I would love to see your faces when I ask this, because I think everybody's facing the same problem. So, do you think it's easy to get your students to produce more? I would love to see your facial expression. Do you struggle? Do you have any difficulties teaching your students to produce more language, to use language in a productive way? Or let me rephrase that, to get information, new content, new vocabulary, new grammar structures, and actually use or apply those things in meaningful ways so that they can learn. Isn't that a big challenge for most of us, I would say? Yeah. Sometimes students love writing and speaking, but I would say, and I've been a teacher for, I don't know, 20 years, most of the time students are struggling a little bit with those skills, right? Either because they're shy, either because they are not very confident, either because they don't have time, either because they think those skills are not necessary. Well, so basically, we spend a lot of time dealing with comprehension of the language, right? So that means that whenever our students go to class, whenever students, and maybe I can even mention private students accessing recorded courses online, hybrid courses nowadays, whenever they go to those platforms, they spend a lot of time dealing with comprehension. So they have to understand the activity. Sure, they have to write something, they have to tick a box, they have to select the best option. But most of the time, really, we're dealing with comprehension. But here's the problem. If we're dealing with comprehension all the time, how does comprehension connect, or how does it relate to production? If I just receive information and understand, comprehend, am I practice production skills indirectly maybe, or not really? And here's the thing. I don't know if you remember that from your neuroscience or biology classes. There are actually very different areas related to speech comprehension and speech production, or let's say language comprehension and language production. So different, yeah, there is a space between them. So I don't know if you knew this, but Broca's area, and that has, well, it's basically located here. I don't know if you can see my head, but this is my frontal lobe. So, and this is my temporal lobe, just here behind my ear. That's the temporal lobe. So this area where the frontal lobe gets closer or connects to the temporal lobe. This is where we have Broca's area. And this has been reported, and we have a lot of studies showing that, has been reported to be responsible for speech production or language production. So the mechanics of language. So much that if you have any kind of damage to that area, you can have something called aphasia. So if you have this aphasia, Broca's aphasia, that means that you cannot really produce language in a comprehensible way, because you cannot put together the words and the phrases. What you are saying doesn't make any sense because it doesn't even resemble language, okay? And that's different when you look at Wernicke's area. So Wernicke's area, there's a portion of the temporal lobe here behind your ear, and then where the occipital lobe, that back part of your brain, and the parietal lobe, they connect, and that has to do with comprehension. So if you have damage there, you might not understand, or the things you say, even though the words are correct, it's fluent, you can say a lot of things, and those words and phrases actually have, some meaning, but the way you're putting things together, nothing makes sense. So it's very common for someone with Wernicke's aphasia to just to say a string of words that have absolutely no connection. And even though you can understand the words, isolated, right? You cannot understand what they're saying. So it's not affecting how they produce the language, but how they understand, or the meaning ascribed or assigned to different words and sentences, right? So here's the thing. If I'm practicing one thing, am I practicing the other? Not really. they are connected, of course. You know, there's a bundle of fibers of neurons connecting those areas, because when we are using language, we have not only to understand, comprehend, but we have to produce as well. So of course they are connected. But if you are focusing too much on one and neglecting the other, you are not really practicing the other. So that's the well, let's say the sad truth that I was going to share with you, which means that if you are just getting a lot of input from your English teacher, your German teacher, whatever language you're learning, you're getting a lot of input. You have access to a lot of vocabulary. You have a lot of activities on the online platform. You're watching series, you're listening to music, you're doing a lot of things every day, but you're never speaking, you're never writing, you're not really practicing those skills, because you have to actually do them to practice them, you know? And that also has a connection to the different types of memory that we have. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here talking about memory, because it's a very interesting topic, I'd say, fascinating, but it's a little complex. But one thing I wanted to tell you is that even memory systems are different, and that comes from cognitive psychology. So if I'm learning vocabulary, let's say I'm learning vocabulary related to types of house or housing or something like that, you know? So you have, I don't know, you have something like a mansion, or you have a condo, or you have a cabin, a log cabin, or you have a flat, an apartment, you know, those words, something like that. They are explicit, they are declarative. So they actually go under your declarative memory system, right? And then you have semantic memory. So that's a sub memory or subgroup of memory under explicit memory, right? So we also call this the type of memory that you can verbalize, which means that, you know, it's a concept that you can mention, you can say, you can utter. So that's one thing. The other thing is implicit non-declarative memory, and that's the kind of memory not of knowing things, but knowing how to do things, you know? It's procedural, right? So if I know all the different parts of a car, I know their names, that's explicit, declarative memory. But that doesn't make me a better driver, because that's implicit procedural memory, right? Maybe I can be an excellent driver without really knowing all the different parts of the car. I don't have to know their names necessarily. Yeah, I mean, there are some controversies here that we can talk about someday, but you know, they're not completely isolated. That's the idea. So what does that tell us about learning English, learning any language, receptive and productive skills, huh? There's more. This is very interesting, because if you look at other images of the brain and where memory usually happens or works, of course, you know, the brain is very complex. We're oversimplifying a lot here, but you can see that there are other parts of the brain that are more connected or related to procedural memory, the know-how too. So I know all the words that are necessary to build a sentence in English about different types of housing or houses. I know all the words. I learned them. If you ask me, I'll give you all the correct answers. I can give you the words. I can write them down, right? But I cannot have a conversation about that. I cannot produce an eloquent, fluent sentence about that, because guess what? I've never done it, or I've done it too little, you know. I've actually heard about it, I've practiced it, you know, in my head. I've done a lot of activities about it, but I have never actually engaged in a conversation and done it, you know. So you don't know how to do it. It's like trying to learn how to drive a car by watching people drive a car and by learning the different parts of the car. If you've never actually driven the car, I'm sorry to tell you, but you cannot drive the car. Does that make sense? Right? So there are different areas of the brain related to different types of memory. And that's why the only way for your students to truly produce is by, guess what? Producing. It's obvious, right? I know. That's the inconvenient truth that I told you I was going to share. So the idea is that we can only really truly practice those skills if we perform them. And here is the big, well, I told you I was going to make you sadder. Now I'm going to make you even sadder. Usually the time we allocate to productive skills in the classroom is not enough. I'm sorry, folks. I wish I could see your faces right now. Some of you might be crying. I don't know, how many hours of classes do you have with your students every week? Some of you probably have, I don't know, maybe you have two lessons or two classes, let's say. So you have two classes on different days, Monday and Wednesday, maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Some of you have 1 hour and a half, maybe more. Some of you might have 3 classes a week. That's great, right? Some might have more. But most people I know, here in Brazil, for example, if you go to a private school, you get maybe 2 hours of class a week. And many times those 2 hours are actually blocked, you know, onto the same day. So it's the same day, have 2 hours, and that's it. That's, I know it might be some people's only option, not very good, because the problem with productive skills, and of course also receptive skills, but let's focus on productive skills here, is habit formation. Habit formation requires repetition, requires more than repetition, a very specific type of repetition that we call spaced or delayed repetition. So it's actually better for you to be in touch or perform this skill a little bit, but more often, you know, more days a week than for you to actually perform this skill for a very long time on the same day. Does that make sense? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples to help you understand that. And I think now my cat is crying, but anyway. I'll give you an example because I like using analogies, right? I think analogies can help. And I will tell you a funny story of what I like to call the driving paradox. So let's start with the idea that, first of all, can you learn how to drive a car by never driving the car, right? So let's say you watch a lot of movies about cars, like what was the very famous saga that a lot of people loved, the Fast and the Furious, right? Fast and Furious. So can you learn how to drive a car by watching all the movies? Can you learn how to drive a car by playing a video game? What if you actually get a simulator? So if you get a steering wheel, you know, the pedals and everything, and you have a simulator on your computer, and then you drive for a while, can you actually learn how to drive a car? Well, the last option I gave you, a simulator, is the best option if you have nothing else. That's how pilots learn how to fly, right? Before they get on a plane, on a helicopter. That's how they do it. They have many hours, you know, messing around with the simulator, and then they get the real thing. Yes, but still, they don't know how to do it well until they do it. You know, you don't know how to drive a car well until you do it. No matter how many hours you spent using the simulator, you still have to do it, because you cannot really learn how to develop. You cannot really develop or create this procedural memory in your brain without actually doing it. Of course, we can learn by observing people. You know, we have a specialized group of neurons called the mirror neuron system, right? That's why when you go to, I don't know, dance classes or aerobics class, have you ever watched the Jane Fonda, you know, aerobics videos? Remember those? So remember that she was doing all those amazing things.
Yes, they are
yeah.
writing. They do remember very well.
Oh yeah, it was great, you know. So remember, yeah, I'm a big fan of Jane Fonda's. You know, she's an amazing actress. She's done so much for everyone in many different regards, and she had an amazing workout routine that became a video, and then people could buy and do the things. So when you watch her doing those things, the movements, you can actually learn. You can copy what she's doing. You can imitate what she's doing because of your mirror neurons, you know. So when you watch someone drive the car, you can kind of do it, but there's also a matter of perspective. If you're always watching from outside the car, you don't know what the person is doing inside the car, that's more complicated. If you are if your dad, mom is driving the car and teaching you how to drive and you can observe them, that's incredibly helpful, of course. But you cannot learn just by doing that. You actually have to drive the car. And the driving paradox here is the funny stories that, well, I'm not sure I'm a great driver, but I can drive. I guess I am an average driver. I can drive okay. I've driven in different countries. I've driven in the United States. I've driven in Italy. My best driving experience was in Italy because we rented a car in Rome, and then we drove to Siena, and then we went to Pisa, and then we went to Firenze, and finally we delivered the car in Venice. So it was an amazing experience driving in Italy. But I also had a terrible experience, and that was driving in the UK. And you probably know why. So a lot of people watching me here are probably going like, okay, if you are British, if you live in the UK or any other country where you guys drive on the wrong side, if I may say that, maybe you drive on the right side and we drive on the wrong side, I don't know. So there's a very different paradigm there. So even though I can produce the skill of driving quite well, I've been doing it for many years, when I have to do it with a slightly different paradigm, which is driving on the other side, oh my God, it's chaos. And I have to tell you, so I was in Bristol, I was there for 1 year doing my master's, and I had to rent a car to drive to Liverpool. I was going to IATEFL. So IATEFL is coming now, right? So I got a car. I said, I'm going to drive to Liverpool. I got a car from a rental place close to where I was staying. And I remember that 10, 15 minutes in, driving, I had just left the place. I actually knocked off the side mirror because, my perspective was all wrong. And there was a problem. Of course, there was a big van parked where they shouldn't be parked. So they were parked over the curb, but half of the van was actually on the road. And because I was on the other side, my perspective was I was still getting used to all of that. So I hit the car, insurance, it was a nightmare. So even though we know how to produce certain things, production is very specific to certain contexts. And let me show you a couple of takeaways before we can talk about more concrete examples, okay? So there's a difference between knowing and knowing how to do something. There is a difference between knowing all the ingredients you need for a lasagna and actually being able to cook the lasagna. And guess what? How do you cook lasagna well? How do you get better at cooking lasagna, at making lasagna? Well, making it, cooking it. That's the only way you can get better at it, right? You can watch a bunch of videos and reflect, and of course, but you will only know if you've learned those things if you try again and if it tastes better. The same thing think about this. Knowing how to is usually context or task specific, like the driving paradox, Just because I learned how to do that in a productive task in the classroom with my friend John, can I do it in the real world with real people, with other variables? Not necessarily. I mean, of course, it can give me an advantage, it can give me the foundation, but it doesn't mean that I can perform the same thing in the real world. Simulations, they're great. If you have them, wonderful, but they can only take you so far because you actually have to get your hands dirty. That's the only way you can produce, you can be productive. So can you have a simulation in the classroom? Yeah, we can do like role play activities, right? We can get students to practice the dialogue. We can have presentations. We can have a fair where students have to buy something. Let's say we have a task where students actually have fake money and have to buy fruits and vegetables, at the local market, and we are selling the produce, whatever. We can do all of that, but the stakes are different. The stakes are different. The variables are different. Even though you're simulating a real situation, it's not the same exactly, right? Because real life situations are the ones that really teach us best, when we really have to do it. Because, if I had done, I don't know, a couple of hours in a simulator before I took my car in the UK, I would have maybe I could have avoided that accident, the incident that I had, but maybe not. Maybe because I knew that, if I screw up, if I do something wrong here, I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm not going to get hurt. It's different when I'm on the road. I was incredibly tense when I was on the road. And it's the same thing when you think about, even though we can be very tense in the classroom because we have to speak in front of our classmates, and maybe we can be more comfortable outside the classroom. Yeah, each student can be different, right? But usually it's the opposite. And then class time is not enough. It's never enough. Even if you are allocating a lot of your lesson time at the end or throughout the whole lesson, if you're allocating that specifically for production, when are they going to do that again? And how many minutes are they actually going to be producing something? If you have 10 students in the classroom, 20 students in the classroom or more, how many minutes are your students actually producing something? And then maybe, let's say they produced 3 minutes in your lesson on Monday. And then they do, I don't know, 5 minutes on Wednesday, your next lesson. Is that enough? Like 8 minutes? They're receiving a lot of information, right? So that's why we try to raise students' talking time, right? Because we want them to produce more. That's why we do a lot of pair work, group work, and all of that. Yes, so we're raising the bar for them. We're increasing their production time. That's also not enough, usually, So we have to find ways for them to use what they're learning outside the classroom. And then I will tell you some concrete examples. Also, intrinsic motivation helps. So here's the thing. Sometimes the task we have from the book, from the lesson that we prepared, even though, it's actually quite interesting from our perspective, it might not be very interesting for your students. So how do you turn that around? How do you get your students to produce more because they actually want to talk about that? Do they have always, and here's the big question, do they have always to talk specifically about the thing that they see in the book or the material that you brought? Or can they actually use that as a platform to talk about something else that can be related? Maybe not, right? If the idea is they have to talk, they have to produce or write, because writing is also a productive skill, why does it always have to be about a specific topic that most people don't like? I'll give you a silly example. Sometimes we are talking about future jobs, right? We're talking about future jobs and we're talking to preteens, and they haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about their future jobs, even if they have. It might not be very interesting, like preparing preteens for a job interview or thinking about what kind of skills they will need for the future job market. That might be interesting for some people. I think for me, it would be interesting because I'm a nerd, so I like basically everything. For a lot of students, it might not be interesting. So they're just trying to get by and do the task as quickly as possible to move on. So it's not very meaningful. So they're not intrinsically motivated, right? So think about the usual process of teaching productive skills or using productive skills in the classroom. Well, let's say it starts like this. Okay, everyone, let's go to page 10 and do exercise 6B, okay? Or, all right, so now that you're done, go to page 11, exercise 7C. That's how we start usually, right? And then the activity says, write a short whatever about whatever. So write a short paragraph about sustainability, about recycling in your community. And then maybe there's a speaking activity that starts with discussing pairs if you believe you are a sustainable, eco-friendly, whatever person, or a green person, right? So it's usually something like that. And then, okay, that's fine. Then finally, we are going to monitor usually. So we're going to walk around because they're working in pairs, they're working in trios, in larger groups, and then we're going to focus on accuracy or fluency, or maybe both. Maybe we can get examples, from both, right? And then we're going to go to the board, and then we're going to write, and then we correct, and we give them feedback, right? So if you think about it, what we're doing is we start with an assignment, and that's in the book. Then they do the productive task, and then they get feedback, right? Am I wrong? I think that's basically how it goes, yeah? But then our philosopher, Freddie Mercury, once asked, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy, right? Well, it's not really real life many times, because how often do you just get together with someone to talk in pairs about how sustainable your community is, or how often do you get together with someone to talk about a scholarship for arts, like an arts program that is on the website, and then maybe somebody can apply. So, some of those tasks can be quite distant from our reality, from our real conversations, the stuff that we normally talk about, right? So they can be quite artificial. Does it mean that we shouldn't do them? Not at all. We should do them. That's not what I'm saying. It's like, stop doing everything from the book. No, 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 no. Keep doing those things, but be flexible. And I'm going to show you what you can do. And most importantly, how can students do it outside the classroom, but in more meaningful ways that actually resemble real life more, okay? Well, let me show you a couple of things, and then you tell me what you think. So some concrete examples. This is an Ellie publishing book. It's called English Goals. Very, very interesting book. And there's this very cool lesson that I think most of us have taught a lesson like this. So it's about classroom objects or class supplies, if you want to call them supplies, like, the stuff that we bring with us into the classroom so we can learn. A pencil sharpener, a pen, notebooks, a notepad, colored pencils, I don't know, a backpack, all of those things, or a pencil case. So obviously, this is a very low level. How much can they produce, right? And you're thinking, well, they can't really produce, can they? Well, guess what? They can. They can produce a lot, and they can produce a lot more outside the classroom if you just give them the right task. So in the classroom, they will probably use their own materials to say, I have this, I have that, what do you have? Or maybe they can use, is there, there is, are there, there is, so there to be, to talk about objects like that. Sure, they can use whatever grammar to talk, or maybe they can associate that with colors, doesn't matter. And that's all fine. You can do that, perfect. But what if, let's say, what if you assigned a task that is related to that, but it has a lot more to do with students' reality nowadays, I'll give you a quick example, something that I did that I think worked really well. What if students had to ask other students from different classrooms or even online what kind of class supplies or class objects they had, and then just show and compare and report. I mean, you don't even have to use comparatives. That's not the point. But let's say they have to interview a real person at school, just who's walking outside the classroom, and get them to open their backpack and look what's inside and report back to someone, to the teacher, to a colleague, to appear inside the classroom. What if you suddenly gave some real life meaning to the task, so that they have an excuse to actually use what they learned in the classroom, but in a real life situation? Because that would be a very good example of how you can turn a page of a book into a real task that they can actually use real people to accomplish, you know? And that makes a big difference because those things are more memorable. And, you know, so this is basic. I can give you more examples. I'll show you, you know, let's move on and let's think of this. So this is the same book, and you have a very interesting activity that says, what's important in your life? And then you have, send your photos to blog space favorites. Cool. You have the student, so you have basically two girls and this boy, and they're talking about themselves and they're answering the question, what's important in your life? So this is a reading activity. Great. If you move on to the next page, you get to the writing activity. So you can do the same thing that they did. That's a productive activity. What's important in your life? Complete the post, use exercise 2 to help. And you have a model here. So you have a model, so you gotta fill in the gaps, and that's it. And then you have the spoken version of that. So you have to basically talk to your partner about joining a club. And then you have some interesting ideas like favorite author, favorite singer, band, whatever. So all of those things are there. Great. And then they do it. They do everything in the classroom. You had a wonderful time with your students, perfect. And it ends there. It dies there. And that's one of the big problems. How can you keep this going? So why not actually have a blog? You know, how many of you have blogs? How many of you have created blogs for your students to post things like that? Because that would be a very interesting solution to get your students at least to write more outside the classroom. And it's a real thing, it's a real blog. We have a lot of tools for blogging for students, you know, and they are safe environments. So you have control of them. So you can do that for your students. They can upload pictures, they can upload many times audio, voice messages, you know, they can upload videos. And aren't those the tools that we're not using as much as we could? And aren't those the tools that can actually help us produce the language? Audio recordings, video? Because the book has videos, the book has amazing resources, but you have to make the book alive so that your students can produce more outside the classroom. Because I told you, just producing in the classroom might not be enough for a lot of students. I'll give you another example. Think about this. So this is ready for Planet English, intermediate level. So now your students can produce a little bit more. They have more skills. And then we have this very interesting unit about leisure, right? And if I don't know if you can see because it's very little, but basically we're going to do a lot of talking about arts. Okay, so you can see the cover, you have a lot of books, there are different types of arts and all of that. Amazing, wonderful. When you get to the end of the unit and you have this writing task, productive skill, very interesting task. It goes like this. You have seen this announcement offering scholarships for an artistic creation summer course. Cool. Use the information in the ad to write a personal statement to accompany your application. That's amazing. So you want to apply. What if I'm not into arts? Do I have the chance? Do I have the possibility to apply to a different program? So, you know, so sometimes you don't have to do much, but just change the focus of the activity. Will it be so different if you do that? Oh, you might be thinking, well, but they have to use the vocabulary related to arts to do that, right? But what about intrinsic motivation? So sometimes we have to make those choices, right? Or, okay, let's keep this. We'll do exactly as the book asks, but we'll also add a photo exhibition. That's the twist, you know? What you mean, André? So let's say you want to get to know your students a little bit better, and you want them to take pictures of where they live, you know, their surroundings, their community, and then post somewhere, or bring those pictures so that we can look at them, we can talk about them, right? Or even better, why not a very short video of their favorite place in the community? in the neighborhood, in the district, at school, in a museum, right? Well, you might be thinking, yeah, but this might not work. Well, it did work for me. I was working a couple of years ago with Italian students. I was teaching a bunch of 15, 16-year-old students remotely during the pandemic. So it was not easy, right? So, and I had to deal with a very similar lesson. We were talking about different colors and arts and things like that. Guess what I had them do? I got my students, because I didn't know them, I didn't know who they were. It was, one of the first lessons we had. They were all living in different cities by the Adriatic, so the other coast of Italy. And I wanted to see where they lived. I wanted to see what their cities looked like. And I asked them, so the productive skill that I was practicing with them was writing, and I asked them to take pictures of art around the city or beautiful landscapes. And I wanted them to use the colors, to share. So what colors caught your attention? What do those colors symbolize? Do you know the artists? And some of them did an amazing job. They got amazing pictures. I was like, whoa, maybe they want to be photographers someday. So again, the book gave me the idea, but I made it alive for them because they had to do it during the week after the lesson. So they had to be in touch with English in a meaningful, productive way outside the classroom, because then they have frequency, they have contact, they have more exposure to the language, and most importantly, their procedural memory. They're doing something. They're not just receiving content, but they're actually externalizing the knowledge in a productive way. So you can do something like that. I'll give you another example. So think about this. So the speaking activity, places in town. So this example I just gave you would fit perfectly here. So go somewhere, take pictures, show your town or something like that. Amazing. Okay. What places are there in your town or city? What places does the center not have? What are the means of transportation? All of that. Perfect. But I did something different. So a couple of years ago, when I was in Argentina, I started walking around the city and I recorded videos for my students. How crazy is that? Because, I had a similar lesson. So I had to, talk about different places in town, but why not Argentina? And then I thought, well, my students are probably interested in Argentina because I think many of them have never been to Argentina, to Buenos Aires. So I was walking around and I was recording videos myself with my phone, just walking around, recording videos, showing different places. So I modeled what I expected them to do. So they did something similar. So for the whole year, the project was, whenever you travel anywhere, just grab your phone. If you don't have a phone, grab your dad's phone, your mom's phone, and record yourself and narrate what you can see in English. And so the idea was, let's use places in town, the vocabulary, the grammar from this unit, yes. But most importantly, let's use the language. Let's produce the language, because all of those things we learned before, they haven't really been consolidated yet, so that you can consider yourself a proficient user of the language. So you have to have the chance to use the language in meaningful ways. And for them, it was meaningful because they loved traveling, they were with their families, they wanted to make their teacher proud, so they wanted to make nice videos, right? That's one way you can do it. There are more. I can show you a lot of other ideas. So this one is very interesting because, so this book that I showed you, Ready for Planet English, actually brings authentic videos. So that's embedded, that's part of the unit. And you have excellent models of how you can produce a video. So this is a reading exercise with a video, basically. So you have the transcript. But why not, after doing the activity, actually asking students, do you think you can do something similar? Can you create a YouTube channel, or do you have a TikTok account? I mean, we're talking about older teens, or even if you're teaching adults, that's even better, because then they have access to everything, right? they can use their social media platforms, they can use different resources that we're not aware of to do those things, right? And we're coming to the end, I promise. Here's something very cool that you can do. So LE Publishing has a very user-friendly platform that you can basically use to access the digital version of the books, but also to add things that are not in the books. So if you're wondering, how can I encourage my students to do that? Well, let's say you access their book, and then there's that video that I just showed you, this video here, and then you come to this section of the platform and you decide to upload an audio or to share pictures with instructions or something, and your students will be able to get other instructions, other ideas to work with the same resource, but outside the classroom. It could be part of an ongoing project. I think we are very, very afraid many times to go like, okay, I'm not really following the syllabus of the book, or I'm changing too much. The book, folks, to me, really, and I think most authors would agree, is really a menu of options. Of course, the sequence should be followed as much as you can, because that's what works best. But sometimes you can recycle the activities that are reading activities, so they are receptive skills activities, and you can make them more productive, because they are perfect examples of how to produce the language in different meaningful ways, and especially outside the classroom, and as frequently as possible. We're coming to the end, and what I can tell you is I'll give you 2 more examples that I think can consolidate, or at least I can try to consolidate what I've been talking about here. And the first resource that I would like to, or let's say a first tip that I would like to share with you is, first of all, frequency is very important. So you got to ask how to distribute productive practice over a week, a month, and not just those couple of minutes at the end of your lesson, or maybe throughout your whole lesson. How do you get your students to be in touch with the language, but not just receiving information? Oh, I watch a lot of series on Netflix. I watch a lot of video clips, music. Yeah, but you're not really engaging with that in meaningful ways. You're not producing anything. But if you watch series in English, you pause, you get a couple of words, a couple of phrases, a couple of sentences, you write down, and then you make a point of using them somehow, writing something with them, speaking, then, okay, you see the difference? You have to produce. You can't just receive and do nothing, right? Relevance as well. So how do you make it significant and applicable in real life? Because, remember, sometimes it's task or context specific. So if you do it in the classroom, it doesn't mean you can do it outside the classroom. And finally, how do you give choice? So if you have an activity that is very nice, but your students are not very interested in that, how can you change it a little bit so that they can do the productive task? So how to tap into students' likes and passions to ignite interests. That's one of, I think, the big secrets, right? How do you get them to want to learn from those resources, from those things? Yeah. And I put together, and this is something you can download and look at, a couple of ideas that might work. Start a blog with your students. A book club. I'm doing that with students right now. Italian students, I'm teaching business English. We only have 1 lesson a week. So they're going to have to read the book and have conversations about the book throughout the week, So again, it's basically not even related to the materials we're using, but it's something that forces them to talk, to read, to think, to write. They can leave messages, notes, comments about the book, and then I can give them feedback on that. If they are old enough and it's not a problem with their parents, start a YouTube channel. But it's not watch a famous YouTuber. Start your own YouTube channel for the kids. Kids might be complicated, but let's say teenagers. Start your own YouTube channels. Get them to record videos for the YouTube channel. Podcasts work really well. TikTok, if they like that, members club, that's cool. So you can have a club of resources that you can upload on a platform. It can be even Ali Publishing's platform, and then they can leave their thoughts, comments, voice messages, video messages, all of those things, and it's exclusive to members, right? Recess, coffee break challenges. If you're teaching teenagers at a school, whenever they go, away for recess for their break, give them a challenge. Like, try to use English for 5 minutes during your break. Talk about whatever you want, and then you encourage them to use a little bit more. Pen pal, so you can get someone international. I've done it so many times. I have actually had my students interview people from all over the world because they were real people. That it was not a recording from a book. It was authentic, and even with authentic videos, real people talking, they were not there live, right? They are usually not there live. When you get someone live to interact with your students from a different country, that makes a big difference as well. You do it in the classroom, yes, but you can also do it outside the classroom. My big weapon, my secret weapon, is the mascot. It doesn't have to be a mascot, it could be a token, something that symbolizes whatever. In my case, it's say hello to Mr. Trunk, everybody. So Mr. Trunk Travels started as a project to boost my students' productive skills. So as you can see, they had a lot of fun taking pictures of Mr. Trunk, of recording videos, and then basically the idea was take a picture of Mr. Trunk, post on the platform that we were using, and write a comment. So you are producing, writing. Make a short video of Mr. Trunk, narrate what he's doing, bring to classroom, or post on the platform. So every week, somebody would take Mr. Trunk home. They started traveling with Mr. Trunk. So now if you go to social media, Mr. Trunk Travels, hashtag, take a picture so you don't forget, you will find pictures of Mr. Trunk in over 25 countries, I think. He's been all over. And it started like that. It was a way to boost my students' productive skills and to teach them some responsibility so they could not lose Mr. Trunk. Nowadays, Mr. Trunk has become an event mascot. So he travels with me to events all over the world, and I take pictures and then I bring back. He has a friend now, Athena, or Athena, that's the Greek pronunciation. He's been to very important exhibitions like Van Gogh, for example, and he's a Star Wars nerd as well. So you can have pictures like that because they stimulate your students' desire to speak and write about those things, right? And again, it's happening in parallel. It's part of your syllabus, yeah, in a way. It doesn't have to be extremely connected or related to what you're teaching at the moment, but it's just a way to encourage your students to speak. And I think I spoke too much. It's time for me to wrap up here. And I want to leave you with an inspirational story, maybe. How can I get my students to produce more, even if they are very low level students, and even if the classroom or the lesson is very boring, let's say, or not very exciting, like telling the time. So this is also an Ellie book, and it's a typical tell the time lesson. So there are many ways you can do it, but I decided to do it in a very specific way. So I was dealing with 9, 10-year-old kids. I called a bunch of friends well in advance, so I called them, I say, hey, on Tuesday, next week, I'm gonna call you between this time and that time. I'm gonna video call you so that my students can ask the time. And then they go like, what? Okay. And then I said, did you know, students, that there are different time zones on the planet? And I go like, they went like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Many of them didn't know. And I said, what time is it in Brazil now? So it's 2 o'clock. What time do you think is in Stuttgart now in Germany? And they go like, okay, I don't know. So let's build a clock. So we started building a clock. That's what we did. We drew a world atlas. We took some paper plates, and then we built the arm of the clocks with cardboard, toothpick, and an eraser, I think, so we can move the arms. And then I was teaching them how to tell the time using those types of clock. And then I said, well, let's call someone and find out. And then I called my friend in Stuttgart who was waiting for me to call, video call. And then it was very nice because my students introduced themselves. They say, hi, how are you? They were very shy at the beginning, but they had to produce language to actually communicate with a real person. And they had to apply the knowledge that they were learning here, telling the time, asking about the time, in real life, really, because they had to communicate with someone. And so we called someone in Wyoming, the United States, in Lima and Cusco in Peru. We called someone in Washington, D.C., United States. We called someone in Dublin, Ireland. We called someone in Stuttgart, Germany. And we even called someone in Iraq, okay? And they all had different time zones. My students were very excited. Every time they heard the time, they would run to this paper plate clock we created and move the arms of the clock, you know? And it was, I guess, a creative lesson because it's featured now in the book called New Ways in Teaching Speaking by TESOL Press. So you can download the PDF and you can actually access the lesson plan if you want. But you know, the premise is very simple. Connect your students with real life situation, real people, so that they can actually communicate really, realistically, as many times as possible. The conclusion for me has to do with, everybody's talking about it. I know you are. Ryan Gosling's amazing performance during the Oscar 2024 night, right? So for those of you who watched Barbie, Ryan Gosling got on stage and he sang I'm Just Ken. It was an amazing performance, really. Everybody tweeted about it, you know. But the thing is, he rehearsed for a very, very, very long time to be able to do that. And he played, you know, he sang with Slash on the guitar. So a lot of famous people were there. And rehearsing a lot, simulating a lot, so you can perform just once, like perfectly, is not really what we should go for when you're teaching a language. I have to rehearse every little detail so that I'm perfect and then I can perform. No, that's the wrong way to go about it. Let's use another philosopher here, Nike. Just do it. When you are learning a language, receiving a lot of stuff, learning a lot of new content, a lot of grammar, a lot of vocabulary, that's great. It's necessary. But if you don't do anything with that, you will not truly learn how to do anything with that. There's a saying in neuroscience that goes like, use it or lose it. And that's the problem. I think that's the mistake most courses are making. We teach a lot of stuff, but we don't get our students to use them frequently, realistically, as often as possible outside the classroom, not just in the classroom. If we can do that, people will learn better. So this is what the conclusion is for me anyway. So we rehearse a lot so we can perform amazingly someday. But I think it's the other way around. So just start performing. Do what you can, just do it. And then you will correct, you'll self-correct. You will just try your own experiences and then you will become a better producer of language, right? Producer of the skill. If you want to know more about this, scan the QR code. My friend and I, Rudy Maciello, will be talking about it live this Sunday for our monthly show called Chá Pedagógico. So we get together, we talk about neuroscience and linguistics. If you want to stay in touch, please follow me on social media, send me an email to my website. You can talk to me anywhere. And please don't forget, if you took pictures, if you like the content we're delivering here, also tag Ellie Publishing. So make sure you follow the YouTube channel. This video will be there someday. Make sure you follow the Facebook page and also everywhere else. All the social media tags are there. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, André. A very, very practical, useful, in my opinion, workshop. And actually, some of the things that you mentioned are actually part of the questions and all the comments teachers wrote, in writing during the session, especially, giving the freedom of students of making mistakes, but at the same time, the necessity, the need for teachers to assess and give a mark. So teachers are really living in this conflict in classroom, especially in classroom. So how can we help them to, you know, just keep this conflict? It's quite tough.
That's a great question. There's always this dilemma. I think science can teach us something about that. We should not look at every piece of evidence that the students produce all the time and give them feedback all the time, because it's virtually impossible. So science works with samples, right? Everybody works with samples. Ali Publishing works with samples. So if you want to show the new materials to a prospect, you don't send every material you have to the prospect. You send the catalog, you send some parts of the book, right? And I think that's the spirit, or the mindset, let's say, that we need to have, is that we're not just focusing on accuracy and fluency and a lot of feedback all the time, but we're also encouraging our students to use the stuff we're teaching them in productive ways, right? In meaningful ways, because that's what they are going to do in life, you know, and they will not have a lot of feedback in real life as well. But maybe they will. Maybe they will have immediate feedback if they say something wrong that people don't get, and then somebody corrects them, or, you know, rephrases or something like that. Then they get feedback right there, and then usually that should be enough for them not to make that mistake again. So I think as teachers in the classroom, there should be productive tasks for us to collect evidence, but samples of our student production, so that we can give feedback on that. It could be immediate, it could be maybe delayed. We can maybe if it's very private, we can send them a note. We can add something to a platform because we don't want to expose them to everyone there, or maybe we can just call them and make sure that everybody's busy and tell them something right there, you know. So there are many ways we can do it, but we cannot do it for everything they do all the time, because it's simply impossible, and it's not really the point. We get samples. So that's why, to give you an example, when I'm working with my Italian students and I want them to produce, I send them to breakout rooms. I join the breakout rooms, I turn off my camera and my microphone, and then I get a sticky note and I start taking notes of what they're saying, you know. So sometimes they make mistakes, you know, vocabulary related mistakes, grammar or whatever, pronunciation, intonation, all of that. So I write down as much as I can, but I never give them all that feedback, because then because the brain doesn't operate like that. If I gave them all my notes, everything I wrote down, it would be too much information for them to process, and it's not the point. So
and
what
they
I
could
try
feel
to do,
frustrated, no? They could feel frustrated as well,
because they made so many mistakes, or and sometimes errors, because they're different mistakes. They know, they have seen it, they slipped, but errors they made out of ignorance in the sense that they haven't learned yet, so they made an error. So I don't give them everything, because so what I can do is I can save that for later, or if it was really an error, someday it will come up again. When they're having a communicative task, when they're producing, they will make the same error again, and then I will have another chance to give them feedback on that, you know. And then today I'm going to focus, well, you guys use this or that, and then I will focus on this. Yeah, that's it. So I get a sample of it, right?
Okay, thank you. Then another actually, your last example with a watch, for example, take you know, out of the book by Ali Publishing, for example, actually introduce this this question. There are quite different comments and questions related to the fact that for a teacher sometimes this is really difficult to engage, to encourage, to stimulate someone who is very nervous, who doesn't want to get involved at all in conversations or in a roll-up production or in a debate. And sometimes it's really tough, or they feel nervous, you know. So there are sometimes they need some tips, or every time they need some different adjustment to encourage.
They do, yeah. Yeah, so how do you get them? I'll give an example of a very shy student that I had 10, 12 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
because I remember that, but she was excellent. She was really good. She was just shy. It was just part of her personality.
Mm-hmm.
That she was an introvert, you know. And I remember that whenever I asked them to get together in pairs and talk and discuss whatever, I could tell that she was very uncomfortable with that. And I realized that it was not so important for her, because when I talked to her individually, she was better than most other students, you know. I mean, for some reason, she was stronger, let's say, in that productive
Yeah.
skill.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, I tried very much not to go over her personality and force her to do something that made her very uncomfortable, even though I constantly remembered her, if she's going to try a certificate, you know, a proficiency exam, she's going to have to interact with people usually, so she needs to be ready for that. But the other problem that might come up is that the ones who are not engaging, they need a lot of help.
Mm.
So, and then in that case, again, forcing them to do something they feel uncomfortable with can backfire, in the sense that they will never engage anymore because you force them.
Ah,
They
yeah,
felt
yeah, sure, sure.
humiliated, they felt exposed. So you have to be very, very diplomatic about it. But at the same time, I think because of the technology we have today,
Mm.
there are ways for them to do that that will not expose them too much. So nowadays, I'll give a very simple example. Padlet. So Padlet is a website, and I'm sure a lot of teachers are familiar. Padlet, Padlet, that you
Mm-hmm.
can, so you can upload any kind of media. So it can be a video, it can be a text, it can be an image, it can be anything really, a voice message, whatever. And I made a Padlet for the class, for the group. And for those students who were not really engaging there, sometimes I would ask them to record a short video and upload to Padlet so that I could actually listen to them producing the language in a more spontaneous way. So I offered them the possibility of working alone more often than not, but there were times that I had to make them, you know, engage. They had to be part of the group because that's life, right? But I think that if they never have the possibility of doing something on their own, they lose interest. You know, some of them
Mm.
will basically rebel against what's. There are a lot of students who are amazing. They have amazing potential, but they simply don't want to engage with people so much.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
we just give them one possibility to do something different by themselves, sometimes they might feel
Mm.
more comfortable doing the
Sure.
other things. You know?
Sure. I reckon
Yeah.
that sometimes for some students, it's just happened that some of them prefer to do stuff on their own,
Yeah.
and others prefer, maybe could be like to break, the ice, to do
Yeah.
something in small groups. That way they feel less shy, for example, and they are all part of a
Yeah.
small group and they are covered by the others, but they can still apply the
Yeah.
language, for
And
example.
there's also, Sylvia, something that came to my mind, group dynamics, and that's very, you know, social
Mm,
psychology explains that very well. Sometimes when you get a very shy student and you group them with a very dominant student who talks a lot, who's very confident, you know, that can be complicated, can backfire. So you have to be very careful with group dynamics. I think we don't pay a lot of attention to how we form groups in the classroom. uh, every teacher has this idea, vary patterns of interaction, vary patterns of interaction. Yes, but how do you do it? Sometimes you
mm,
put people who are, they don't work well together, but you say you should be able to talk to everyone in the classroom, not if that is going to cost the task you're about to do, and it's going to actually make it worse for you. I don't think you should force people to work together if they don't want to, they don't
no,
like
no,
it.
no, sure,
So
sure.
so you have to find out which group dynamics work best in the classroom. Sometimes you put two people together, they are best friends, they're going to misbehave, they're going to become disruptive, you know. But sometimes you put two quiet people together who are very introverted, they become best friends. They always want to work together. They talk, you know. So you have to find out the group dynamics that will work in your lesson, in your classroom,
Yeah.
you know.
So many things for you teachers to take into account. I'm afraid every time you give a lesson, I can see that it's
Yeah.
such a beautiful, you know, job. So I think we have reached the end of this session. So I would like to, of course, thank you, André, for your clear and very, very practical workshop. And I also would like to thank all our teachers who, you know, decided to keep and stay here until, you know, late, because it's actually later than usual. And I hope, you know, we go back to many at least of your questions, and anything you got Andre's email address, and, you know, the publishing contact, so please do get in touch. And just one last thing to remind you is about next week's live workshop again. This one will be about young learners exams and practice makes perfect by Jane Ritter. Make sure to register and follow us. And I hope to see you all, basically. And André, thanks again. I hope to see you very, very soon.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Ali Publishing, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.